Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Reach. I'm so glad you guys are joining me today because we're going to be talking about something that is super important if you happen to live, especially in the state of Florida, which is hurricanes. I grew up in South Florida, and my dad actually worked for the power company for Florida Power and Light for like nearly 50 years. So when I was a kid, it was pretty common that he would be gone sometimes for days because there would be storms and there would be many people without electricity. And back in those days, I'm certainly dating myself, but back in those days, most of our power lines were above ground. And so it was a huge dilemma because a good wind would take the power lines down. Nowadays, a lot of our lines are underground, but certainly if you happen to live in a rural area of our state, which I also happen to live for a little bit of time, our power lines were above line and we had wells. We didn't have city water. So I could totally relate to you guys out there who face a little bit different challenges than we might face in our more metropolitan communities. So that being said, particularly for the autism community, hurricane season can be just one more thing that we have to contend with, right? Because there's so many challenges when there is an impending hurricane, because there's all sorts of things that have to take place in and around your home that can leave a person who likes things to kind of remain the way that they are. It kind of sets them off into really in itself, it could be a tragedy. It could be a lot of stress and really make for a very anxious ridden situation, even if the storm doesn't happen to come directly to your area. Because that's the thing we know about hurricanes, right? Is we're all watching, we're all listening to the radio or catching it however we can catch it. We're following it, right? We're looking for that cone. And there's a reason that they call it the cone of uncertainty, because nobody's truly certain until it's there. So that means that we need to be as prepared as we can. Hopefully this hurricane season is going to be a really light one. So we can cross our fingers and our toes and hopefully that is the situation that we're going to have. But we need to be prepared in advance because that will make the stress that's going to happen anyway a little bit lighter. So that's what we're after right now. So just a couple things, when you have especially children in your home who have autism, it's really important for you not to kind of give off a vibe that you're freaking out, because all of our kids, doesn't matter, if they have autism or they don't, are sensitive to that. And they're sensitive to, what their parents are feeling, what emotions they're giving off. So you really want to be really thoughtful about that as you come into the season of storms. And so there's a couple things that you could do to kind of get there in advance. So the number one thing that I would encourage everybody to do, no matter who you are, is take out your phone and go around your house, around the inside of your house and the outside of your house, and get video of what your home looks like, what type of things that you have in your home now. Because if there happens to be some type of devastation, you want to have recent proof or evidence of what you had in your home, right? You want to have that. And the other thing that's really cool is you could engage with your children, or if you happen to have an adult with autism in your house like I do who loves video, let them video. Let them run around and get some video of the cool things that they like. That way, if they end up in a situation where they're displaced, where you guys are having to go to a shelter, they can look back at a video at their home of when it was a really nice, calm time. And, kind of makes them feel like, oh, I'm there, even if they're not. All right, so some of the things that we know that you're going to have to do, right? They're going to tell you, we've got to shutter up, right? Put your shutters on the windows, which is going to make things dark inside. They're going to tell you to really, especially if it's something that's really looks like it's coming towards your area, they're going to want you to put your important articles in safe spaces. So some of the things that you might think isn't going to be a big deal, in the end could turn out to be a very big deal. And believe me, Having to visit an emergency room because somebody got hurt in the preparation for a hurricane is not the place that you want to be. Unfortunately, I've had that experience, and it is complete chaos. So you don't want to be there. So when you are putting up your shutters, first of all, you want to make sure that, especially if you have young children that cannot swim, or really young children at all, if they can swim or not, make sure that they are inside and that somebody is watching them when you're hanging up the shutters, because it can be a crazy time. And every year when people are putting up their shutters, the kids get out of the house and they could very easily get into a body of water. And then you're dealing with a true tragedy in your family, which you do not ever want to endure. But sometimes when we get really busy in setting up other things that we have to do, we forget that there's water around, there's a pool in our backyard, there's a pool in the neighbor's yard, there's a canal down the street. So please, please, please make sure that you monitor your kids. Social stories. You want to have a social story. Have a social story now. Now's the time to prepare a social story and include photos in it of your kids, when there is peace. And then in the social story, talk about the things that you're going to do and practice those things. If you have a certain space in your home that you're going to kind of gather together, or if you decide, we're going to go to grandma's. If something happens, we're just going to go to grandma's house. Have that in your social story. So you want to make sure that you put those things in there and that you could go over the social story in advance, right? So that's, if you're writing a social story about preparing for a hurricane, you might want to talk about what are the things that you need to do in your home to prepare for an impending storm. Don't wait for the moment when everybody's stressed out, because you're going to be busy trying to get food and get water and put shutters up and get into a safe space. And if the electricity is flickering, there can be all kinds of things that's going to stress everybody out. That is not the time to go, oh, we got to pull out the social story. And everybody's freaking out. So try not to wait until the last minute on that. It's really important. If you have a vehicle, of course, you want to make sure that you gas up. So if I were you across these next couple of months, I would pretty much always have my car on at least half full. So when you see it getting to that half full range, just pull into a gas station and fill it up. Because that's another thing. You don't want to have to get in line at the gas station for hours sometimes, and then just to pull up at the pump and there is no gas left. And if you do need to evacuate, you want to have that. One year, oh goodness, probably about 15 years ago, there was a storm, and it was what we call a sloppy storm. So it wasn't really bad. There wasn't like a lot of devastation, but there was a lot of trees. A lot of trees came down. I live in an area that has a lot of trees, so a lot of our trees came down. Our power was out for probably 3 days. And my son he just could not tolerate being in a house without electricity. It was extremely stressful for him. So I'm lucky, and my parents lived in northern Florida. So I basically loaded the kids up and took them out of town. So for me, having a full tank of gas was it. I was so glad that I kept up with that. So you want to make sure that you're always ready for that. Have your evacuation plan. So if you do have a relative in another part of the state, talk to them now and set that up, making sure that you guys know, okay, this is what we're going to be doing. You want to make sure that if a storm is coming, you want to put your refrigerator, you want to make sure that everything is as cold as it can get. You want to make sure that you're monitoring things, of course. Be listening to the radio. And, we get a lot of our news on social media. So you just, pay attention so that you know what's happening. If you are told to evacuate, do that immediately. Don't wait, because if you wait, then there's going to be barricades up. So you don't want to wait on that. We have FEMA as response, and our organization, the Autism Society, has actually done some training with FEMA so that they recognize a little bit more about autism. But you want to, if you have not taken yourself or your loved ones over to your local police department and just introduced yourselves and your family to them. If you are a person with autism, if you live with a loved one with autism, make sure that you do that, because you may need a first responder during or after the storm. And it's so much better if they're already familiar with some of your needs. It'll just make it so much smoother. You'll be so glad that you did that. If you have a generator, remember, do not go putting a generator inside a closed-in space. People die every year from monoxide poisoning. And they call it this hidden cause of death, because you might not really even notice it, but it will kill you. So you do not want to put a generator that's fueled that way, gasoline, into a closed garage or into any kind of enclosed space where you're going to be. So be really careful of that. I know a lot of people have generators because the thought of being without electricity is just way too much, but you just want to make sure that you do not bring it into your home. Like I said before, my dad was an electrician, and so we were constantly told, about down power lines in puddles. And these days, you don't see too many kids playing in puddles. But when I was a kid, that was a thing. That was what you did. And I'm sure that some of you listening to this can remember back at your childhood, and you're like, oh yeah, I remember after a storm, we would go out and play in the puddles. That was so bad. So just be mindful of that. No, don't play in puddles, especially after a storm. If there's an electrical wire down, again, that's going to be a tragedy. You don't want to be in a place like on a bridge if there's high winds. There's a reason that school gets closed down when there's a bad storm. And it doesn't even have to be a hurricane, but schools will close down if the winds are 35 miles an hour or more. And that's because buses should not and cannot safely drive when there are 35 mile an hour winds. And it's the same thing for you. So do not be out meandering around in a on a bridge or something like that when there's high winds. Okay, you want to be careful of that. You want to make sure, of course, if there's down lines and debris and all that stuff, make sure that your phone's always charged. You can purchase one of those, like a little charging station that you can charge your phone. And of course, we basically all can plug in our phones into the car, right? So if you could turn on your car, again, if your car is in the garage, do not go in there and put your car on and let it run with the garage door closed. Again, we get back into monoxide poisoning, so be really careful and mindful of that. You want to make sure that you're prepared to document any of the damage and anything that happens to come up. So you want to keep yourself a list, be ready for that. Move your vehicle to higher ground. If you are fortunate enough to have a garage, you can park in the garage as long as it's not a garage that gets flooded. Hopefully your garages do not flood, but you want to be ready for that. Backpacks. All right, so here I'm going to get into a few things really much more specific to children with autism. But I tell you, my son is an adult, and he really benefits from this too. So having backpacks all set and ready to go. You might even designate it, a sensory backpack or hurricane bag. Maybe store it up in the top of your closet so that it's not, you always know where it is and it's not going to get lost in with the toys or something like that. But in that backpack, that's your kind of your hurricane bag, could be your getaway bag if you need to get out of town, but just something that you can grab quickly and you know that all your tools are in there. I will tell you that when we do training for police officers and fire departments and even emergency room staff, one of the things that we talk about and that we provide in these kits that we provide, I'd say probably the most important thing in the bag are noise canceling headphones. Now, yes, you can get some that are super expensive, but you can also get some that are relatively cheap. So don't make yourself crazy. You really just want something that is going to mute some of the outside sounds. It doesn't need to be like the ones that the guys on the tarmac at the airport use. So don't have to go crazy. But just some headphones that kind of cover the ears, right? Not the little earbuds, but like something that covers the ears. And maybe you want a set that plays music and maybe you don't. Maybe you just need one that just muffles the sounds of the outside world. Because if things get chaotic or the wind's really blowing and it's scary, everybody in your home may want a set of headphones. So I would say definitely that. We also include in our bags different sensory items. So cool bubble wands and these plastic things where that has like oil in it with these little colored beads. And when you tip it one way, the bubbles go up one side and then the other side. And, it's really just a sensory experience. Also things that are soft and squishy or crunchy or wiggly, different types of items that kids can kind of toy around with in their hands. To just fidget with during stressful situations. You want to, of course, have in your bag a list of emergency contact numbers. Now, I know you're going to say, oh, I don't have to know that anymore because it's all in my phone. But what if something happens to your phone? A lot of us are so reliant on our phones that if our phone went dead, if, I don't know, the towers were down, the cell phone towers were down, how would we communicate with each other? So you want to be mindful of that. Again, we're talking about emergency situations. So write those phone numbers down. Make sure that family members are aware of where you are, because we wouldn't want them to panic and think, uh-oh, something happened, and then they get in their car when in actuality everything is fine, right? So make sure that you have that. Write down your insurance company, their contact information. And again, you want to make sure that you have your all your documents stored aside and everything is sort of ready to go. Okay, so I just think that all in all, hurricanes are a stressful time for basically everybody, but particularly in the state of Florida, probably the coast of Texas, Louisiana, we just happen to be in the hotspot area. And so that just means that we need to be a little bit more diligent and prepared, because just like with everything else, it's about being prepared, and that in itself will reduce a lot of the stress and anxiety that we feel. So make sure that you set up your bag. Again, you could store it up in the closet. Put your child's favorite books in there. Put some crayons if they like to color. I know a lot of kids on the autism spectrum who are incredible artists. So make sure that you have the stuff that they love in there. Maybe when you get them a new toy and you see, oh wow, they really love this new toy, buy an extra one and just store it in the bag. If they have anything that they like to carry around or they like to hold or like to take with them when they go to school, have that in the bag, that extra one. Okay, all right, well, I hope that you guys got some benefit from this. I know it's a little bit of a crazy time, but we're all going to be okay. And remember, the Autism Society is here for you. We have both the Autism Society of Florida at autismfl.org, and of course, we have a national organization. So if you're listening to me and you're not in the state of Florida, there is the Autism Society of America and many affiliates across the country. So I thank you guys for listening, and I will talk to you in just a little bit. Have a good one. All right, bye-bye.